How do we look at the Eagles-Buccaneers game from a fantasy football perspective on Wild Card Weekend? And what are our PrizePicks picks of the week and our FanDuel lineup for Sunday and Monday? It's time to break it down as we begin another edition, close another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're a destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day as well. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, if everyone's been watching and listening to our shows, we've broken down all but one game from Super Wildcard Weekend and looking at the fantasy options there and the props and all the good stuff from these games related to player performance. So we do have to take on the Eagles-Buccaneers. It is the nightcap and the closer here on Monday night. So we'll look at that game in particular. Then we'll look at the whole weekend again and break down our prize picks of the week. We'll each have 3 regular picks and each have 1 demon pick, pushing in the envelope a little bit there. And finally, we'll look at our FanDuel lineups. We'll reveal what we have something there for Sunday and Monday slate. So a lot of good stuff on the show. Before we dive in, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Michelle, let's dive into this game, our final game of the week. If you missed any of the other game breakdowns, they're up there on our archives. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts versus Baker Mayfield, 2 guys that played at Oklahoma, similar systems, now doing pretty well in the NFL. Let's look at this. Will both of them be healthy enough? They come in banged up here to put in this game effort. Now, you have 1.5 passing touchdowns there. The over-under for Baker Mayfield, 236.5. Jalen Hurts, he's hurting, fully expects to play. We're still waiting on those numbers to kind of materialize, especially with A.J. Brown's status up there. Do you like Baker this week, and do you think Jalen Hurts is someone you want to trust?
See, this is the thing with both of these teams. With Baker, I mean, last week he really struggled, right? And maybe it's a divisional rival. The Panthers had some good defensive games. Like, they either were super hot on defense or terrible. So I'm not taking last week too much into consideration, but I will say maybe the ankle injury really did hamper Baker Mayfield. He seems to be super banged up. He has the rib injury, the ankle injury now. So that's my only worry when it comes to Baker Mayfield. We know the Eagles defense stinks, allowed the second most passing touchdowns, second most passing yards in the league this year. So the matchup's amazing for Baker. And each of the 4 games prior to last week, he had 2+ passing touchdowns. He's been on fire in both passing yards and passing touchdowns. So I would love to take his over, right? I think he has 2 passing touchdowns at least. I think he hits the over of 236.5 passing yards, which is currently his projection on FanDuel. The only thing that would worry me is the injury. But if I had to take a bet, I'm going to bet that he hits both of those overs.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much have to throw in the Eagles. These 2 defenses pretty good against the run all year. They've had some lapses. The Eagles, in particular, down the stretch, giving up some rushing yards. They give a big game to Saquon Barkley in Week 18. So that worries me a little bit. If they want to actually play from ahead in this game, which would be bizarre, but that could actually happen here, the way the Eagles are banged up, and that could be some more Rachaaed White, but we'll get into him in a moment. Now, let's look at these receivers. It's not looking good for A.J. Brown. He's missed the first practice a week. We still have a couple more to see how he progresses. DeVonta Smith says he's going to play, so that's that. So let's start with the healthy receivers in this game. First, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. What are you feeling here? I mean, Evans obviously a little bit higher. 69.5 is his receiving yards in most places. 56.5. I think I know where you're going, but let's see.
I actually like them both, right? Mike Evans is way more inconsistent, so it's always going to be riskier betting on his, but at home he's hit this number each of the 1, 2, 3, 4 last home games, and most of them have been easily over the 69.5 receiving yards projection he needs. But Godwin's been getting a lot more targets as of late, been pretty consistent. He's like, I could picture him getting like right at 58 receiving yards, right? That's kind of the wide receiver he is right now. And maybe if Baker's a bit more banged up, he's trying to get the ball out quicker. Maybe that leads to even more targets for Godwin. But I could see both of these guys hitting their over. This offense really just runs through these two, right? And Rachaaed White. So in that situation, I feel good about these two both having a solid enough game, while neither of them I see absolutely going off.
Yeah, I mean, when we look matchup wise, Darius Slay also plans to return and play in this game. So he would be lined up on Mike Evans. Now, Darius Slay hasn't been all that great this
Yeah, that might
season.
be a good thing for Mike Evans.
Yeah, they were actually slowing down, both of them, him and James Bradbury, right? James Bradbury has actually been worse. So look at Chris Godwin. He's now on the outside. Trey Palmer might have some opportunity to make big plays. If you're digging a little deeper here, Sidney Brown, who was working as a safety slash nickelback, he's out for the season too. They're just decimated in the middle of their coverage. So if you want to look at Trey Palmer, you could. It's pretty low everywhere you go for Palmer. But I'd go Godwin and Palmer, and I would take Evans to juice it up a little bit, not just the anytime touchdown, but the first touchdown scorer. I would just go in that direction. Yeah, just to add a little bit of fun to it. Now, AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith, AJ Brown is going to try to play, but I don't know. It doesn't look good. DeVonta Smith, at least I know he's practicing in full, where Brown didn't practice at all in the first session of the week. So this is very iffy. I don't know. I think I would still play AJ Brown, but I don't know if I would play him in like a DFS. I would still look at his totals and see if they adjusted based on the injuries, but I don't know. I'm not feeling either of these guys just because of them being banged up in this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because we didn't really get anything back from the MRI results, right? They said they're going to do an MRI on AJ Brown's knee, and it's been dead quiet. I have a feeling that on those MRI results, it showed up as bruised ego. I still think AJ, I mean, it didn't really look like an injury. He fumbles. It's like this huge thing where he's acting like it's a torn ACL maybe, and then he's just like fine. He's walking around. And I don't know, like. And there's been nothing that comes out. I'm surprised he didn't practice. I feel like he'll be fine to go. DeVonta Smith, I think he plays. It just matters. We won't know how good that ankle is. Like, we won't have that information. So Smith, I want to stay away from. It's not to say he can't have a good game. We also don't even have the lines up right now because we don't know about any of these injuries on the Eagles side. So I just think all of the Eagles offense is pretty risky right now to consider betting on. But what about Rachaaed White? I think that's the last guy that we could talk about with this Buccaneers offense. We know he's been heavily involved. Production has dipped a little bit over the last few weeks, but still, performing at a solid level. His line's at 63.5 rushing yards, 91.5 scrimmage yards, and then 23.5 receiving yards. Which of those three would you feel best about for Rachaaed White?
I think it's definitely the rushing yards. And you would think this would have been maybe a different answer, like early in the season, right? When they were feeding him with targets. But you look at the recent yardage production in the passing game, not a lot. Part of it is they're playing from ahead, they're running, and they don't need to check down and all that. And they're a good team. They were better than expected here. So it's kind of been like the James Cook story, right? I mean, we went in, okay, he's going to be a big part of the passing game. He's going to go there. Then as he got better and better and still not great efficiency-wise in the running game, they needed him less in the passing game, right? And they also want to throw downfield. That's the nature of this offense overall, is like run, and throw downfield to the wide receivers. So I don't feel good about the receiving yards at all, given his recent history. And the scrimmage yards a little too much for me. So I do have a good one for him when we get to the PrizePicks, but 63.5 rushing yards, I'm taking that over because, again, the Eagles' run defense has not been good of late.
Yeah, I think I like the scrimmage yards because, again, we don't, with Baker's injury, I do think maybe he just gets it off more. Now, last week he only had 18 receiving yards, but the 4 weeks prior, he's hit this over of 23.5 receiving yards in each of those weeks. So it's cutting it close with just the receiving yards, but with the rushing yards, I do think if he hits the 63.5, it means he was given a lot of carries, and hopefully he can hit more than that. So that kind of just gives me leeway on both sides here with the 91.5 scrimmage yards. So I like going with that. Which team are you taking to win this game? Eagles are favored by 3 points. Do you think the Buccaneers just win straight, or are you taking the Eagles to cover or Buccaneers to cover?
Yeah, I tend to get more upside minded in the playoffs in this stage, and I did pick the Rams. I'm also taking the Buccaneers just because the state of both teams right now.
Yeah.
And there's better vibes from the Buccaneers. They're at home. It's a Monday night game. That helps. I'd like the over as well. It's at, I think, right around 43.5, 44. I just like it going barely over that, but I feel a little bit more confident in that game than some of the unders that I had going there on Saturday and Sunday. So I like the Bucks. I think I had a 24-22. It's not a score that you usually see, but kind of more pointing out that they're going to pull the upset, and I did that more so we could get the over in that as well.
Yeah, these two teams are going in totally different directions. Eagles have the last 5 of the last 6 games. The Buccaneers have won 5 of the last 6. My only concern is we get a bad Baker Mayfield game where he completely falls on his face. That could be how they lose this game. But both defenses are struggling, but I still trust the Buccaneers defense to play much better than the Eagles defense. So I'm going to take the Buccaneers money line, honestly. Like if you want to take Buccaneers +3, but if you want to make some extra money, I'd go the money line way. We're going to get into our favorite picks of the week to even make you more money, right? Why not? Money's a great thing. So we'll get into that in our next segment. But first, let's talk about one of our great sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you from Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, you just create an account on the Game Time app, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Vinny, this is my favorite time of the year or of the week, doing our favorite picks of the week. If you don't have the PrizePicks app yet, download it. You can get in on the action with us this week. We'll give you our 3 favorite regular picks and then also our favorite demon pick, which is just one of those riskier picks, and you can make more money off of it when you hit it. So give me your 3, well, I guess your 4 favorite PrizePicks picks of the week.
All right, for my regular picks, I'm going with Rachaaed Rice. It's a good matchup here inside against Kader Kuhu. I love saying that name. 65.5 more on the receiving yard totals for Rachaaed Rice. The first game, he only got 2 targets. He wasn't a big part of the offense as he was now. He's just crushed it multiple weeks. I think there was only one in the last 5 where he hasn't passed this number, and he's had a couple 100-yard games really blown up here. So I would consider Demon with him a little bit, but it was a little too high. So I'm going to go with just the regular old 65.5 more than receiving yards for his price pick. Now, the other one I looked at very carefully is Matthew Stafford. He's at 275.5 with the passing yards. Look, he's hit this in 4 of the past 5 games. So this is pretty easy for Matthew Stafford. The other thing that's going to happen here is it's hard to run on the Lions. So figure the Rams are going to put it up. They don't mind putting it up because that's the weakness of the Lions defense, and that's the strength of the Rams offense, passing it all over the field. So Matthew Stafford's going to come back to Detroit. If you look at his playoff history, actually, he's had a couple clunkers, but consistently he's been above 300 in his time with the Lions and Rams. So I think he does it again here. He's not going to let down coming back in a good matchup. And now, one of his key targets, I'm going to include him in this mix. It's not Cooper Kupp. It's not Puka Nacua. It's Demarcus Robinson, 40.5. You say that's pretty high for the third receiver, right? He's hit this number in 5 consecutive games. So, look, Demarcus Robinson is getting involved just enough. They don't throw too much to Tyler Higbee at all. So this is it. These are 3 guys that involve the passing game. They don't throw to Kyren Williams. So these are the guys that are involved, Nacua, Kupp, and Robinson. So I like that 40.5. Now, my demon pick, I'm going big here on James Cook. I mean, I'm going to 89.5 on his rushing yards. I think he's going to run well on the Steelers. They're going to control that game. They're the biggest favorites, so the game script should be in his favor to carry the ball in the second half. So, yeah, pretty easy explanation on that one. So those are my 4 picks, Michelle, and let's see what yours are.
Yeah, I think a Rashee Rice one is probably the riskiest of the bunch. I love the Stafford and DeMarcus Robinson. It's so weird how all of a sudden DeMarcus Robinson has been so involved. But we were saying earlier in the season, everything's going to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but they really have found this third option, and it's clearly helped out the offense. I mean, this
Yeah.
offense has really flourished over the last month or so, and it's not because of DeMarcus Robinson, but it's because they found that third option to go to that's reliable. So love that.
Yeah.
And with your James Cook one, I actually took the running back on the opposite side. I do like the rushing props in this game. It's supposed to be kind of nasty weather, snowy, gross. I mean, it's Buffalo in January. You got to expect that. But that's why I'm going with Najee Harris. He has a much lower projection than James Cook. And I don't know if that's actually fair to him, right? That doesn't really make sense. Najee Harris's line right now is at 59.5 rushing yards. I'm taking more than that. Last two games, 122, 112 rushing yards, a ton of carries in those, 27 carries, 26 carries. But even prior to this recent breakout with Mason Rudolph, I mean, he was pretty consistently hitting this number anyways. Of course, he had some big, whoopsie games in there where they completely went away from the run. But I think they realized with Mason Rudolph, he's just opened things up for the running game, right? But also, they can't just go into this playoff game hoping Mason Rudolph wins them by throwing 40 plus times in this game. They got to run the ball. Bad weather. I think that happens. So I'm going with Najee Harris, more than 59.5 rushing yards. And then in that same game on the opposite side, I'm going with Bills tight end Dalton Kincaid, more than 36.5 receiving yards. It's not that I think he's going to have this huge blow up game, but that line is super, super low. And like I said, with the bad weather, it's not like Josh Allen's not going to pass at all. He's going to still get passes in, but probably safer, shorter passes over the middle where you can kill the Steelers. We've seen a lot of tight ends just destroy them over the middle this year. And Kincaid went through that period where he kind of disappeared, but has come back the last 2 weeks with some bigger plays. 87 yards, 84 yards the last 2 weeks. So happily take that more than 36.5 receiving yards for Dalton Kincaid. And then I have one more tight end as my other regular PrizePicks pick of the week. David Njoku, Browns tight end, more than 56.5 receiving yards. We know he's Joe Flacco's go-to guy with that right there with Amari Cooper, right? So Amari Cooper still dealing with a heel injury. He destroyed the Texans, Amari Cooper, last time. We would expect the Texans to focus in on stopping him a bit more, which will allow David Njoku just to have even more space. But 90 plus yards in 3 of the last 4 games here. So love that for him. And then my demon pick is CJ Stroud, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns against the Browns. I brought up on the show a couple days ago that the Browns defense on the road is not even close to what they are at home. They're actually a pretty bad defense on the road, allowing nearly 30 points per game on the road, allowing nearly 2 passing touchdowns per game on the road. Each of the last 3 quarterbacks they've seen on the road, Jake Browning, Davis Mills, and Matthew Stafford, they all had 2+. It was 3, 2, and 3. Geno Smith put up 2 touchdowns against them on the road, or I guess on home for them. Gardner Minshew, 2 passing touchdowns at home against the Browns. Like, not the same defense for whatever reason. So if those no names can do it, besides Matthew Stafford, he's good. I think CJ Stroud can do it just fine.
Yeah, obviously that is your riskiest pick because it is demon for a reason. I think it just the Browns defense and the Texans, will they get a rushing touchdown or something like that? I mean, those things sometimes can get fickle, but I do like the concept and analysis behind it for sure. And I almost put Kincaid and Njoku with my picks, so I totally sign off on those. And Harris, yeah, we talked about it, that we're more interested in the running games in that Bills Steelers game than the passing assets for the most part. So good stuff there as we do that. Now we've saved our FanDuel lineups. We're doing a Sunday and Monday slate, so all those games on Sunday, the triple header plus your Bucs Eagles game, we'll reveal our FanDuel lineups for that. Let's take care of a little bit more business with one of our sponsors. All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Jace Medical. I know we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk just for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I didn't or can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if a significant other or one of my family members there got sick. My kids, especially now, we always want to make sure they're good to go, especially in the winter. And you could have a supply chain issue that keeps them from the life-saving medication that may protect them and the ones that they need. Well, thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial diseases, including a lot of things with UTI, respiratory, all those things that are nasty, skin infections, and you're going to be in good hands with the Jace case. This stuff could happen to any of that. Well, Jace Medical and your physician can help you there with an encounter. It'll be reviewed by the board, and then certified physician will, and your medications will be dispensed by a person there for you. So a lot of good stuff, and you'll get them at a fraction of the regular cost. And it's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use the promo code Locked On to get a good discount, $20 off your order. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show and look at our FanDuel lineup picks here for the Sunday, Monday slate. So we're combining all those games. You can play different ways, definitely, this weekend. We've given you a way to play on Saturday. So time to reveal our picks here for FanDuel. I'll let you start with your quarterback.
Yeah, after your picks of the week, I'm a little nervous we might have the same stack here, but my quarterback is Matthew Stafford. Went with him. He was a good amount cheaper than Josh Allen was the most expensive. Dak Prescott you had to pay up for. Matthew Stafford, I feel like he could put up the same production as those two have, but you save a couple $1,000s on FanDuel, so I went with him.
Yeah, guess what? I went with Matthew Stafford too. So we're even there, and I might as well tell you who the wide receiver is. We'll go a little bit out of order and do the wide receivers next. It is Demarcus Robinson. So if you've thought that I was relating my PrizePicks with my FanDuel, yes. And look, he's cheap, right? Of all the options, you have to get one cheap guy. So my other wide receivers, however, Chris Godwin, I talked about. I like his matchup here against James Bradbury, and a little bit cheaper than his teammate Mike Evans. I almost got into my third guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown is my third. I mean, what else do I have to say? I mean, he's their number one. He's all over the field. So that's who I'm paying for. I know there'll be a lot of interest in CeeDee Lamb this week, but he's really expensive at the top. So I'm going a little bit cheaper with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then have a couple of bargains there in Godwin and Robinson.
Yeah, I'm jealous of your Amon-Ra St. Brown. I couldn't fit him in. He was too expensive, but my expensive guy was Puka Nacua. I took him to go with Stafford, but I also took DeMarcus Robinson. So I have the 3 stack there. I went Matthew Stafford, Puka, and DeMarcus Robinson. So I need a lot of scoring from the Rams here, but we know that the Lions are a really tough run defense. We expect a lot of passing. So I like that. And then my third wide receiver is Jayden Reed, who I did think you were going to take as your favorite PrizePicks picks of the week. I left him for you, and you did not. He's sitting at like 48.5 receiving yards. We both really like that, but I expect him to have a good day against the Cowboys, and he has been the Packers' leading receiver. So those are my 3 guys: Nacua, Robinson, and Reed.
Now, I did think about Reed for many reasons, but I just couldn't do it. I just was a little bit worried about Jordan Love and that matchup schematically here for the Cowboys. And I just think there's a little bit of boom or bust with that passing game. I think it could blow up, it could not. So I kind of stayed away from that. I don't know if I'll regret it later. In fact, I stayed away from that game in entirety, and that probably might be a mistake. But let's look at my 2 running backs here. James Cook, look, if I like his numbers for the Demon pick, of course I'm going to go right here as my RB1 technically. Well, really, they're about the same price. Rashad White is my RB2. Again, these are the guys that produced all year. There, I mean, you look at some of the others. I mean, are you going to go Aaron Jones or Tony Pollard or something like that? Or I could have gone Najee Harris, I guess, and looked at it, but I do have a piece of the Steelers running game later. So these are my 2 backs, Cook and White.
Well, I did go with Najee Harris. So I took Najee Harris, and I took James Cook. So we both have James Cook here. And Najee Harris, they're kind of middling tier price here, not going super, super expensive, but like I brought up earlier, the weather in this game is not supposed to be fantastic. I expect both teams to lean on the running game a little bit more. So the biggest thing with James Cook is you're so scared of him not getting the touchdowns, and we're going to need those in this kind of tournament. It can't just be all yards. You need some of the, at least a touchdown here too. So that's the only risky thing with Cook, but Najee Harris, I feel pretty good. We'll get into the end zone at least once.
Yeah, those are good picks there as well. And now I do have a tight end that I had to go to. Like it kind of teed up for me that I was going to go in this direction. And I look at Dallas Goedert. Given the state of A.J. Brown right now, I don't know. I think he'll probably gut it out and play, but DeVonta Smith's a little bit banged up. The Bucs are vulnerable, giving up yardage to tight ends. So, look, Goddard is not, speaking of touchdowns, he's not a guy that you would count on to score, but you'd have to do it on a long play, right? He's more of a field stretching tight end. So that also gives him some big play upside when you're looking at tournament as well. So I'm going to Dallas Goedert. I think they have to use him. He has to be a big part of what they do if they're going to expect to beat the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I went with Dalton Kincaid. I brought it up earlier.
Yeah.
The Steelers' middle of the field so weak. We have Gabe Davis going to miss this game. Should be more targets to go around, and he's just been more involved. Again, they went away from him. They've gone back. So I like Dalton Kincaid here. A little pricey at 6,000, but not the priciest of the bunch, and I was able to afford it. So I felt most confident in Kincaid this week. Sam Laporta sitting there at the priciest, and even like his knee. What's going to happen with that? I don't know. Like, how effective will he be?
Yeah, you couldn't go there. So there was actually limited options. Kincaid was probably my other option to look at. I mean, I thought a little bit about Jake Ferguson, but that's about it. Now, my flex play, I told you, I already revealed it. It's not Najee Harris. If it's a part of the running game for the Steelers, it has to be Jalen Warren. I just took him because, look, I can afford it a little bit. They're a little bit weaker in coverage without Matt Milano. They've allowed some numbers receiving wise. I mean, Warren isn't great because he kind of needs a touchdown to really come through and a good chunk of the rushing yards, but that's who I could afford. So I put him in there, and he seemed like he's the kind of flex play you would have put in seasonal leagues anyway.
Yeah, I'll say I like my flex play a lot more than yours. I think he has more upside. Jahmyr Gibbs. I went with Gibbs.
Okay.
I know it's a tougher matchup against the Rams, but especially if Sam Laporta is banged up and they can't utilize him as much, he should be used more in the receiving game. We know he has explosive. He's so explosive. He can make those big plays, and he has huge upside in fantasy. We've seen it all season long. So I went with Gibbs here. Don't love the matchup, but I could fit him in at the cost, and I love the ceiling he has.
Yeah, I wish I had Gibbs instead of Warren, but that's okay. Maybe you'll surprise and they'll trail and Warren will have to catch some passes, whatever. So my defense, as I've mentioned this, I like to correlate running back and defense as well as wide receiver and quarterback. So I have the Buccaneers. They were the cheapest in relation. If the Eagles are banged up, Jalen Hurts has been turning over the ball. It's been a little sloppy for them. They got some playmakers there in Antoine Winfield and some players that can really cash in, maybe score a touchdown if there's a big mistake by the Eagles, which there was last week. So I do say the Buccaneers, and again, the best price point I can enter there without going too expensive.
100% with you. That's why I have Buccaneers for all those same reasons. I don't have to repeat it. Buccaneers, the price point was too good for the matchup that they have. And I think it's because they allow a lot of yards, right? They've actually been pretty good at points per game allowed, but they allow a lot of yards. So that gets people worried. And I get it. But with the Eagles banged up, they're not themselves. So love that Buccaneers cost for defense.
So there you have it. There's our analysis for an entire Super Wildcard weekend. Everything you can imagine. We broke down all the games. We gave you PrizePicks. We gave you DFS, 2 lineups, one for Saturday, one for Sunday and Monday. So everything you need. If you missed anything, go back to the archives, check it out. I think we're going to be taking Monday off. It's Martin Luther King Day, so we also have a game too. Like the weekend will not be over. So we'll come back Tuesday, look at what all happened here, and then flip the page to the divisional playoffs. So we'll do that here next week on Locked On Fantasy Football. As for this week for Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.